And I'm going to be taking one of the atelier groups for interior architecture from here on in. Michael's asked me to do a kind of introductory talk, just to sort of say a bit about myself and a bit about my work. Some of you know me already, some of you don't. I'm looking forward to get to know you all. We haven't got much time. I think the room's only booked till 1. So what I've done, I've just got a kind of collection of work from my practice, Surface Architects, and I'm just going to kind of whiz through that work just so you've got a kind of feel for the kind of stuff that I've done. But I suppose as a brief introduction first, I am an architect. I studied at Sheffield University and the Barclays. I've worked for various practices in London, also in Australia. I worked for William Alsop for quite a while, over 7 years actually, and probably most notable point there was doing Peckham Library, which I'm proud to say won the Sterling Prize in 2000, so that was quite a moment. After that, we did a few high-profile competitions, including one for the RCA and the BBC. Sadly, we didn't win. And that was a kind of career-changing moment for me, really, and I thought, well, maybe Peckham was the high point, and maybe it's time to move on. So, with another colleague from Allsops, we started Surface Architects, so that was over 10 years ago now. And that's been fun. It's been a bit of a roller coaster ride, as it is for all sort of emerging young practices. And we've had good times, we've had difficult times. And to be honest, recently it's been pretty difficult. But nevertheless, I want to show you, essentially, what I want to show you here is a sort of collection of Surface Architects' work over the last 10 years. And it's roughly in sort of historical chronological order, more or less. It's going to be a bit fast and furious, I expect, so I'm just going to run through. I'll try and leave about 5-10 minutes at the end just to have a review and for you to ask any questions. Okay? So, without further ado, we'll crack on. Ah. Technical problems straight away. That should play like a slideshow. Is anybody really good with Keynote? No? Oh, yeah.
I think you selected one slide.
I've gone to play, so that should put it into slideshow mode, and then it should key forward. But it's not, it's just jumping back.
There's no play sign on the first slide.
Yeah, it's not play.
Yeah, that looks a bit better. Yeah, okay. Sorry about that. Okay, so a lot of small practices start with houses. We did a few. There's a couple here, one in Hampstead, one in West London. This was a sort of classic Victorian terrace house, sort of L-shaped in plan, with the extension going out to the back. We completely refurbished the whole house, but the kind of core part of the project was the ground floor, which had a kind of split level living room kind of behind you from where this photograph is taken, and then a kind of dining area linking through the kitchen to the garden beyond. So we infilled the space to the side of the extension, made it one big flowing space. And then we had a kind of what we call a zone of influence, which was finished blue on all surfaces, ceilings, walls, floors. And within that zone of influence sat this new sculptural object, which happened to be the kitchen. Then on the right, the space that kind of occupied the garden, treated with various materials, translucent glass, coloured glass, and we're playing with different material effects of translucency, colour and transparency. A couple of details. It's made with fairly simple materials. There's a lot of work that went into the three-dimensional forming of it, very sort of detailed three-dimensional model. And the object is multifunctional, filled with light. Another project, which is a bit of an essay in what you can do with structural glass, laminated glass. The whole of that extension is literally made from glass and a few metal fittings. Also early on we did quite a few competitions. This was one for in Leipzig for audiovisual arts, an extension to the University of Leipzig. And we sort of went for a pretty kind of radical proposition. So the existing buildings is kind of E-shaped classical plan building. And we proposed that the building was literally physically cut and then sort of stretched by literally putting the wings of the building on movable foundations and sliding it along and stretching the building. And stretching each wing to a different degree to create an additional space, which is coloured at the top, that fitted the programme of the competition exactly. And then that process of stretching was taking the surfaces of the existing building, both externally and internally, and literally extruding them. It's a bit like kind of breaking a Mars bar and pulling it apart. And then rendering that surface as a kind of translucent coloured material. So you can see from inside to out. And internally might have an effect, something like that. So you're taking the richness of the historic space and creating this visceral new experience. We then sort of kind of, we got into the university sector, probably through my contacts at Allsops, and had a very good client with the Queen Mary University of London. They had a library for their medical school in a deconsecrated church, and they wanted to upgrade it, provide some disabled access, a very kind of pragmatic brief that they gave us. But the client was really good, and he said, look, although this is a very sort of functional brief, I want you to really go for it and do something quite incredible. So we were really interested in this space at the crossing of the nave and the transept. We decided to put a new object there. They needed to get a lift down into the crypt. So this object developed. To cut a long story short, we developed a narrative, named this object the ambiguous object, that contained the lift. But it functions both as a lift and a repository for the most exquisite books within the library. Also, it's an amazing light fitting. It has the appearance of a grand pendulum within the space. And subsequently, we also looked at the reception area and, in a similar language to the ambiguous object, developed that as well. So that's a view looking up at the crossing point of the nave and transept, and here's the new object. And we were sort of influenced by various kind of conceptual ideas, including kind of Foucault's pendulum, and the idea that the upper part of this object, which is completely separated from the lower part, doesn't touch at all, just filled with light, and the implication that it could rock like a pendulum. And just to prove, it really is separated by about 100 millimetres, and the upper part flooded with light. Got into ideas of ambiguity of visual weight, material and texture. So the object is kind of rendered as though it's made from slate. It's actually the image of slate, which is enlarged by about 100 times, and that's printed onto stainless steel. and then we kind of got into the pattern of the stone as well, and kind of played with that. And then the language that we developed from the ambiguous object, we then also put into the reception desk, added some more materials. I'm constantly kind of interested in the way that these new objects could reflect the existing neo-Gothic interior. Another competition, this was in the Channel Islands in Guernsey for a restaurant in Guernsey Harbour, and lots of kind of yachts floating around the place, and the programme was essentially, quite simply, it was a restaurant and a bar. And as I've kind of often done with work, I'm kind of interested in just kind of analysing the programme into its kind of key constituent parts and giving each one a different kind of character and thinking about the relationship between those characters. So with this project, it was about the way that the bar space interacted as a separate form with the main restaurant and created the kind of sculptural piece with the opportunity for opening out one from another, so you get sort of rooftop terraces that look out over the harbour. This is a sort of in-house model that we made. It's kind of photoshopped up a bit, but it's essentially a cardboard model. We then commissioned for the competition a professional model, which is a little bit more slick. It gives the essence of the scheme and a kind of folded weak form language. This is a project we're quite well known for. It won an RIBA award, it was quite widely published, again with Queen Mary University of London, so this came on from the Ambiguous Object project. I'm going to say quite a lot here about the way that this project developed, because it kind of touches on some of the things I put in the notes about what we could do within my atelier group in terms of methods of working. So let's start off just with some sketches. Oh, sorry, here's the money shot. So that's been published a bit. Essentially, it's the way that this extension relates to the original building, which is the lockkeeper's cottage. And you'll see beyond, there's the canal, and then there's a public park on the other side of the canal, crucially. And behind, you'll see from where this picture is taken, is the main university campus and the humanities faculty. And this building is a postgraduate centre for the humanities faculty, so it's looking to make a connection with that faculty. That's why its kind of front entrance is looking back that way, and why it's kind of also integrated into a landscape strip that comes back to the humanities faculty. I'll say more about that in a second. Oh dear, that's very difficult to see. What I was going to say, just see. This is a sketch of the existing buildings. There's the cottage and it had an extension which completely blocked off the connection between the faculty and the canal and the park beyond. And what I wanted to do was completely open that up. So right from the beginning there's kind of a sense of wanting to kind of clarify the existing building by stripping it back to just the cottage pure and taking away its extension and replacing it with something new. If you could see it, what these sketches would show is kind of the way that then this new accommodation, which wrapped around the cottage, kind of extended and became a series of different characters. There was a character called the wing, a character called the tendril, and then the cottage itself. And the relationship between these different elements is what kind of generated the final form of the project. That's kind of sketch of the way the plan turned out. And some further sketches of how the elevation developed. Sorry you can't see those clearly. These are some sort of finished presentation drawings that we gave to the client about the time the building was finished. So you can see in dark, in black, the footprint of the building with the cottage here, the new wing wrapping round, which is about this kind of dynamic movement from the humanities faculty round the building to the canal frontage. And then the drawing here is showing the way that we've thought about the form of the wing and the surfaces and how they kind of unfold to actually create that shape. And then the experience of travelling around the dynamism of the building, this drawing is showing certain sequential views of perspective, which are overlaid, kind of like a slot frame animation. This is like a component drawing, as an exploded axonometric showing the different elements. So obviously the cottage to the right, the wing, the tendril, which is the staircase and the lift, and then the facade that kind of wraps around that and interpolates between these two primary elements. There's a kind of soft timber element that tucks in underneath the wing. This drawing was sort of a study of the formal language, the way that the shape of the wing could kind of in theory be extended to some final verse points, what you might describe as a kind of metaphor. And also when the wing, when the tendril comes down, touches the ground, has an effect on the landscape and creates this new blue strip that runs through the landscape back to the humanities faculty, and we also did a project for that landscape as well. So it's kind of positioned to the side of the wing element where the sequential perspective drawing is taken. It's made in various different materials. The wing itself is anodised aluminium cladding. This part of the facade is render in glass, and the glass is set absolutely flush with the render. And then round the cottage side there's an area of timber cladding as well. You can see that. The dynamism of the project is important for me, the feeling of this new element leaping up from the ground, sort of extending over the water and looking actually back towards just the view along the canals towards Docklands. And then kind of experience being within this common room space on the first floor, and these large windows open. You hear the sound of the water and you can cast it on. It's really a pleasant, tranquil space. The cottage itself was also refurbished for teaching rooms, seminar rooms. And that's a view as you step into the entrance, showing the staircase, which is clad in oak. The existing surface of the cottage, which is left raw as found. And then the new elements on the wing above you and the tendril here. Detailed study of the materials. The internal orange colour of the wing was sort of allowed to bleed out through the windows and became this element that we named a tag. A kind of tag on a piece of, name tag on a piece of clothing, brand label. It's a punctuation point, really. And then the way the building appears at night. So that's the main student common room here, and the teaching rooms here. Those are the teaching rooms. That's a big seminar room created in the existing building. Buildings either side by Richard McCormack. They're postmodern. They're a pretty good example of sort of late 80s postmodern architecture, but it was kind of quite odd to juxtapose our building against that. So that was kind of a great project. It's really intense, so lots of ideas within it. It was fairly small and ambitious practice. We were kind of looking to get bigger jobs within the university sector. And that is easier said than done, because there are European procurement rules about competitive tendering of all projects. Nevertheless, we did get a feasibility study with Queen Mary to look at their estate strategy. And this is really just sort of saying, it's a thing about size really. So we leapt from that little project to a project that was looking at 100,000 square feet of teaching space in theory. And they wanted to do that in order to replace a tower, a chemistry building tower that they had. That they had all kinds of problems with. It was riddled with asbestos. They needed to demolish it, but they didn't want to demolish it until they got planning permission for 100,000 square feet of space to maintain their kind of property estate value. So we did a study that showed that you could provide that amount of space. The existing tower sort of located here on the campus, 15-storey high building. And this project showed that you could get the same amount of space in a much lower building that was integrated in a much more sympathetic way with the rest of the campus. sort of main buildings here to the south. And there's a sort of quite a complex mess of buildings around the existing campus, and there is a key route east to west around the old original building, the Oxford building, which we wanted to enhance with a new building. So it's very much thinking about the flow of people across the campus east to west, creating this new curved form. The programme also asks for 2 enormous lecture theatres, so they're located towards the back of the site. And then that's an upper plan just showing a sense of scale really, of all the teaching space that you sort of locate within one of these curved wings. And there are 2 of those that are sort of shifted slightly out of scale. Anyway, the brief was basically to do a sketch design, to do an outline planning application to maintain the student at the university's estate value. And so we did this simple massing study design, which about these 2 interlocking blocks sitting on a kind of pilotis of columns, with the form behind being the very large lecture theatres. But it's really all about creating a new public space and that route at the front. So we got the planning permission, so they were pleased. Sadly, they then ran into financial problems and the project didn't progress much further. They spent ages demolishing the old town. Anyway, that's a long story. We started to get into the school sector. The first were private schools. This was, we were invited to do a competition for Bedford School to extend their cricket pavilion. And very briefly just going to show you the 2 options that we came up with. The first one was to extend the existing 1930s building, which had these existing steps looking out over the cricket pitch, and these funny little wings either side that had changing space in. And we sort of appropriated one of these wings to reclad it and allow that cladding in dense strips to expand and grow to the new wing of the building, with the openings between creating the windows looking out over the cricket pitch. There's a lot of kind of changing rooms and shower rooms and stuff within it, and a big gym on the first floor. So that was option 1. Option 2 was to knock down the original building and start fresh with a pure white box that also contained this pink sort of cone of projection, like an external amphitheatre looking out over the cricket field. Changing rooms behind this element here. And the inspiration for that is the honours wall within the original building. So the public school, decades, centuries of history. So the honours of all of the old boys and their achievements in cricket on this wall. So we proposed to sort of take that, appropriate it, enlarge it, and integrate it into the new cladding of the building. From the work that we've done at Queen Mary, we were contacted by Birkbeck, University of London, to do a new film and media studies centre in Bloomsbury. And the key space, we refurbished a lot of the existing building, but behind the existing building there was a sort of a 1960s space. It was a double-storey volume where we decided to sort of locate the key part of the media centre, which was to include an amphitheatre here and then breakout spaces and seminar rooms. So if you can imagine, there's a kind of, in front of this, there's a Grade 2 listed Neo-Georgian building on a Bloomsbury Square, and this is kind of hidden behind. And we wanted to create a real otherworldly environment. And really the focus of the project became the space around the auditorium. And we thought of it as sort of conceptually as like a kind of black box of a kind of solid form into which the primary functions were inserted and then space is sculpted out. And thinking about the cinematic film-like narrative, we sort of created a process of a tumbling block that travelled around the auditorium space, and as it travelled it would make a series of sequential cuts, void cuts from the black box. And with each cut we defined a certain material, texture and colour. And as the thing tumbled it kind of morphed into different shapes, and we basically set a process running using the computer to literally carve out space around the auditorium. So in my notes I'd said something about kind of process working and serendipity, and designing a process as much as designing a project, and this is an absolute classic example in my work of how I've done that and used the computer. What you're doing is you're working with the parameters of the project to push it in a certain direction, but you're not absolutely sure the way it's going to turn out, so you're just sort of letting it run. And it creates results that you couldn't just design intuitively. And it's a process that I'd like to introduce you guys to. I've said to quite a few of you already that once you've got a three-dimensional computer model, it's amazing what you can do with it. Both in terms of still images and also animation. And I guess this is kind of taking it to an extreme, where we've taken three animations and superimposed them. Well, what it's looking to do is to accentuate the feeling, the emotion that we're looking to generate, the complexity of the spaces, the richness of the space, the variation in spatial arrangements. So there's a two-storey space that was completely carved out, and there's a neat bridge element that runs across that void that's looking from the bridge down. You see the staircase poking out the floor here. So there are lots of different material finishes. Some are very shiny and hard, some are matte finishes. We've got structural glass, we've got steel. So we're playing with those juxtapositions as well. And I talked at the beginning about wanting to create a kind of otherworldly environment, but there are places where the tumbling block, as it moves around, actually cuts through the exterior of the building and gives glimpses to the environment outside. And we created at the back this huge picture window looking to the back of the Bloomsbury Terrace behind, and you could only be in London really looking at that view because of the nature of the architecture and the materials. Yet you are in a space that is completely otherworldly. So it's a place for kind of reflection, contemplation, and it's the main kind of breakout space beyond the auditorium. Thematically, we made this particular space the cone of real projection as opposed to the cone of virtual projection, which is within the auditorium. And that's the lower ground space, completely within the yellow resin floor and white resin floor, staircase emerging, a bridge above you. Again, this project's been quite well recognised. It won an RMA award and it's been published internationally. Again, sort of coming back to talking to universities about doing larger projects, I think it was following work back around at the same time. We talked to goldsmiths again about extending their estate. on the New Cross Road. They had a site next to the old town hall in New Cross, which they were considering redeveloping. So this was a feasibility study, and we were looking again at different kind of characters, elements coming together. And if any of you remember from physics, electromagnetic, I think it was, radiation, the idea of X and X, Y, Z coordinates was a theme that we hit on, and then sort of thought about that shape, developed it as a sculptural form, and again as a series of primary components in the building. So it became these three kind of beam-like elements creating a tower, a raised beam at the front linking to the town hall, and an entrance, grounded beam projecting back, creating a major student space with the sculptural element, the original hand object floating above it. Around about this time, we also started talking to developers, and there were quite a few projects for regeneration around the country. A really good developer, Igloo Regeneration, very interesting guys to work with. And we did a project in Leeds, Marshall's Mill, with DRMM and Urban Salvage. It's kind of funny ideas competition where we had a kind of residential block as a kind of courtyard given to us in a master plan, and each of us took a sort of section of the courtyard, but we designed it independently. And the idea was that we'd sort of design them blind and then bring them together and see what happened. So it's like the game Exquisite Corpse. For us, we found Marshall's Mill was originally a factory for making flax. And we were interested in the process of kind of binding flax, where this kind of thematic image came from. And the various elements within the building then became wrapped in this element. And each one